Well, hello and good morning. Welcome back to a Kooky corner of YouTube. Hopefully you have seen the first video in this little two-parter where we went through how we were going to create a piece like this, but obviously differently. So I went through this piece with you, and I said what I wanted to do was to add in some extra. Now on this piece what I did was that was made into a plant pot, vase, whatever you want to call it, and I added in some embroidered flowers, which you could also do with this one, but I just wanted to switch it up a bit because I want to make this into more of a green plant thing. May need a few more leaves for this. So I've got some little felt scraps in my box, so I'm still working with scraps. So what I'm going to do is grab a couple more just to play around with, because I only cut these out the other day just to fiddle around with them to see how they looked. So I'm going to cut out a couple more and then we'll see how we can make this into some kind of a plant maybe. If you wanted to, skip this bit altogether and just do some long stitched stems and add some French knots. This is a word. I'm struggling with words today. French knots would do for this one. So you could do that. Okay, so I'm going to go and grab my box and I'll cut out another few bits of the leaves from the felt fabric and we'll see what we can do with those. So I've got my leaves in some kind of an order, and what I want to do now is to stitch them down. Now I'm not going to go crazy, so I think what I'm going to do is grab this very light, that stranded cotton that we were using previously, and just get myself off 2 threads from here. It's going to be awkward just because I'm on camera. Separate them out one by one and slowly, otherwise they have a want, if you can see that middle bit, it just has a want to tangle. So it's just going to be awkward, isn't it? There we go. Let's snip that bit off there. Okay, so I've got 2 strands now. Even them up. Hopefully we're even at the bottom. Maybe not quite, but it doesn't matter. Not in the bottom there. And I need my thread and my needle. I've got my needle. I'm gonna thread that through. And what I'm going to do is, let me take you down a little closer. There we go. I'm going to start from my plant pot. And I'm going to take it up to that first leaf there in one big stitch. Whoops, that one wants to come too. And then just do a little running stitch down the middle of this leaf. Just a tiny one. Pull away a little bit. It's just to hold that in place. I don't need to stitch all the way around this because this is my decorative element. Decorative elephant. There we go. That's gone on there. And now I will, because I don't want to jump all the way down to the bottom of the plant pot again, I'm going to go the other way. Ooh, don't stab yourself. So we're going to do little stitches down the middle of this one, 2. You can see I'm just going in and out. It's just a holding thing, because we want to give it a little bit of dimension. Well, I do. I mean, if you really want to, you could you could stitch all the way around it if you want to keep it solidly in place, but I kind of think that would take away from the leaf effect for me. But you do you know, if you fancy that. And then I'm just doing a back stitch stem here because I think it might be too long just to take a long stitch. So I'm just going in and out on that one. So I did a combination of stitches there. Managed to unthread my thread as well. So I'll just correct that and then I'll be back in a second. So back in again and taking a stitch up there this time to this leaf that's down at the bottom end here. And a quick running stitch to keep that in place. Just in and out a couple of times. That will hold it. And from there, I'm going to jump up to this one. A couple of running stitches down this one. Sewing in and out. Getting towards the end of my thread here as well. So what I'm going to do here is, bearing in mind that leaf's not properly attached yet, but we don't care about that for a minute. I'm just going to turn it over, quickly finish this bit off, rethread. She said hopefully, hoping that she's got enough thread on this to complete. I do think I do, which is good. I hope you are enjoying this process. This is something you can do. You could prep yourself up a whole background, and then once you've sort of tacked down all your pieces, you could have this as a little kit to take out with you. You know, stitching on trains is a great thing to do. I'm not so keen on stitching when I'm in the car. Not me driving personally, obviously, but I don't tend to go so well at looking down at my stitching when we're in the car. But on the train, I think that's fair game. Okay, so I'm coming back in where I'd finished off there. I'm just going to take that as a long stitch back down to my pot. And if I want to be sure that that's going to be staying in place and not getting caught on stuff, then what I'll do is I'll just couch it down. That's basically taking the stitch to one side and then going back down the other side and pulling it in so that you've got, it's kind of a cheat stitch really, isn't it? But it does hold things in place. So back to my leaves. Do I want the big one or do I want the small one? Let's go with the big one, shall we? So I'm going to go up to that top bit there. I could do a running stitch, I could do a back stitch, but I'm going to do one of those long stitches with a couchy bit in. Just to mix things up a bit. You're just kind of tacking that thread down in place. That's all you're doing with that. Back up to your leaf. And then, you know what I'm going to say, a running stitch just down the middle of that little felt piece there. You can have a lot of fun with just placing things around on here as well. And if you've got some little flowery shaped buttons, you could stick those in as well. Or a couple of greeny sequins that go in there nicely. Play with it, have fun with it. This is supposed to be a fun thing, something that you can do and just not worry about it too much. Okay, so I've got another leaf there, but I think that's going to be overkill. So I'm going to call that a day with my plant. So now I've got a plant pot and I've got some little planty leaves coming out of it. And as I said, you could do just pure embroidery if you wanted to just embroider in some little flowers in that as well. Right, the other thing I wanted to show you was how to finish this off. If you look on this one, I have kind of done something with the edges, which is just finishing off those raw edges. If you want to do that, you could leave it like that, and that is absolutely fine. You could mount that on a canvas and it would be perfectly fine. It's not as if it's going to be washed or, used every day. You're just going to be admiring it on your wall, or if you put it on a deep canvas, you could stand it on a shelf. So I'm going to show you now how to do something like this. So I'm going to gather my supplies and I'll show you exactly what I do in order just to get a little border on it and finish off the back. Okay, so I picked out some contrasting fabric and I've just got a small strip of it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lie that along there, and then I am going to sew along there. So I'm going to get myself some thread. I've got some kind of, it's not kind of matching, but it's in the ballpark of. So I'm going to go with it because you're not going to really see this much anyway. So just thread this up. I could actually do the smaller needle for this one. Yeah, smaller needle, so I don't need a big head on my needle for thicker thread. It's just a, come on. That's my, roll it around the finger. Okay, so I'm going to take it from this end. I've kind of laid it on top like this. Start from one end. And you could do this with a machine if you wanted to, but I'm presuming you're here for the slow stitching. So what we're going to do is just a back stitch. So you kind of go out and then you go back. That's where the back from back stitch comes in to the last stitch you did. And go out another stitch length, and then you go back. Out another stitch length, and then back to the stitch you've just done, making sure you're going through all of the layers that you've got there. Out and back in. And I'm going to complete that all the way along there, and I'll come back and show you what I do next. Okay, so I stitched along all there, all from that end to that end in a back stitch. You could do a running stitch if you wanted to. I mean, it's just a holding stitch, but I'm just kind of fancied showing you a different stitch. So what I'm going to do now is, if you've got one of those little roller press things, there's a little roller press I've got my eye on getting, but finger pressing will do just as well. So you're going to press it out so that it's nice and neat and against that stitch, and then we're going to flip it over. I'm going to turn this one in like so. Do some finger pressing on here. You could put some clips on this if you wanted to. And I'm just going to do that stitch again that I did on the front, on the back, and then you end up with something like that. So I'm going to go away and do that and join you back here when I have stitched along here. Now when you're stitching along this side, make sure you're only going through the backing felt and not going all the way to the front, because this is not a decorative stitch, this is just a holding down stitch. And for this one, I think I might not do a running stitch. Actually, hold your thoughts, I'll get my clip and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. Like, these clips are game changers when it comes to doing sewing. I'm not a big fan of pins. Me and pins don't get on too well. They have their place, but for me at the moment, these clips are much more helpful. So I'm going to just hold down the turned over fabric. So just to recap again, I've turned it over once and turned it over twice because I had enough to do that. Work with what you've got, because your strips of fabric might be smaller than mine, so you can just work however you want to work. I'm going to go back with this thread again, going back with the thread, And grabbing my little needle again. Little threading song. My fingers are quite done in. I did a piece of wire work this week. Yes, I need to get some better wire tools is the answer. But I digress. Okay. So I'm going from underneath that little piece of fabric there. Getting rid of all those bits of extra thread. And I'm just going to do a straight stitch into the backing for this one. As I said, trying not to, first bit's always the hardest, trying not to go through the front of my piece, because it's just going to go through that little backing piece and up like that. Once I've got a few of these in, I can take this first clip off, she said. So I'm going to move that down there actually, so that it's not in my way and that you can see what I'm doing here. Not going through to the front, just taking in a bit of that bottom felt, so it's not going through. Yeah, it's kind of like you're just collecting a little bit of that underneath to secure your fabric. Okay, I'm going to go along, finish all this one, and I'll be back and we'll have a look at the other sides. Okay, so I'm back with the other side. I've made a start on it. So exactly the same, laid my fabric down and then back stitching along the edge. Like so. Move that out of the way, it keeps wanting to get in the act. So if you can see, that's just a little back stitch, and I'm going to go all the way along here, and then I will be back and show you what I do with the sides. Okay, so I'm back. I've taken you in a little bit closer. So if you can see, I've gone along that edge. Same as last time, we're going to do this finger pressing or thumb pressing down of our fabric. No irons required. I wouldn't like to do a shirt this way. No one would want to spend the amount of time finger pressing a shirt. But for little things like this, it's great. You don't have to break out your iron. Okay, so that's finger pressed around that side. And now I am going to finger press this down once. And then folding it over onto the other side like that. Finger press it down. Check to see I've got a nice little border on the other side. I have. That's all good. So now I'm going to clip that like I did previously. That's kind of undone there. Maybe a bit more pressing to keep that down in place. I mean, I'm not stopping you from doing your iron. If you want to break out your iron for such a small seam, be my guest. Okay, so back to the stab stitch around the edges. So some people call this straight stitch. I call it stab stitch. You're just going in and out. Take that clip out the way and move it along. And this, again, you're just taking a little bite out of the felt underneath and not going all the way through all your layers. Just to the point where you have collected a little bit of the felt. Doesn't have to be super neat because it is the back of your piece. But if it pleases you to be neat, then be neat. Okay, I'm going to do that all the way along there, snip off these ends, and then I'll show you how I do the side piece, which is basically the same, but maybe we just have to think about how we're going to finish off these end bits with our last pieces that go on. Okay, so I'm back. I've chosen my contrasting fabric, which is that little piece there, and I think that will kind of bring that piece into a nice solution by adding other bits in, because it kind of makes it look more of an actual finished piece. So I'm going to do the same again with this. Lie it along the top. I'll trim it off there, I think. Get myself a strip. Wasn't very neat cutting, was it? Let's tidy that up a little bit. Okay. So face down on this one, because this has actually got a definite front and a definite back. But with this one, I'm going to attempt to turn it in a little bit. There. So I might actually need my clips for this, just so that these ends are going to be nicely finished off. You could do this afterwards if you wanted to. I'm just going to try and be a bit extra and turn them in now. So that is like that. I might just pop another clip in the middle. Keep this all in place. So like we did before, I'm going to back stitch along there and then flip it over and then do that stab stitch along the back to hold it in place. This time it's different because I've just turned in those edges to try and keep, that's going to make that look neat at the end. But don't worry if you don't do that, we can figure out a way just to sew up those ends and it'll all be fine. Everything is always good in Kooky Towers, everything is good. So I'm going to go away, I'm going to do that on both my edges and I'll be back. Right, so here we are with our finished piece. I have done both of these side bits now. What I did with the end bits there is just kind of just tacked them down so that everything's enclosed, but it's all enclosed and looking good. Now, there are many ways that you could finish this off. I'm just going to grab another piece of felt out and show you one of the ways. Spare bit of felt hanging around in the back. Yes, I do. Okay, so if you wanted to make this into like a little mat of some kind, I don't suggest a cup on here. I don't know how well it'll balance. And also you don't want to ruin all your beautiful stitches with drips of tea and coffee. But just a little mat, just to put something on. You could cut down a piece of felt to just a bit smaller, I'd say, than your piece. And then just stitch all around it with a little like straight stitch, stab stitch, whatever you call that, all the way around, and that would be a finished piece. If you wanted to, you could put it on a piece of mount board or canvas, and that would now go into a nice square frame of probably about 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. So that's another thing you could do. On this occasion, I would probably break out my my felt glue. So I would kind of do a sticking job to that. You could use double-sided tape. I'm not sure how well that would hold, but if you used a really strong one like a carpet tape, that would work for that. Two different ways of putting that onto your board. You could put it onto a canvas, in which case you could kind of use small stitches to go through the canvas to hold it on. Again, you could glue it on as well. So let me just take you up a bit. Take you up a bit. You could put it on a smaller canvas, one of the thicker, this is kind of like a centimetre and a half You could get the deep canvases and pop it on that, and that would then stand up somewhere, so you could stand it on something. There are many different ways that you could use this. You could use it on the front of a cover for a book. So if you made like a flat journal cover, you could just stitch this onto it, so it would be a cover. And yeah, there are so many different options. If you're really happy and you want to display your piece, that you could just try all those different ways out and see which one you like the best. So that's it. That's basically your very first piece of slow stitching in the Kooky method. I have got some requests from people who I have spoken to off in my social medias, and they are asking for me to go through how we got to this wrap stage, different things that you'd need to do in order to make that. Basically, it's just a bigger piece done in exactly the same way, but there'd be different ways of finishing it off. So I could go through that. Also, someone's asked me for like a brush holder. That will be a similar kind of thing to this, I imagine, but the inside will be much more utilitarian. So it will be more of a canvasy inside with sections for you to put your brushes. If you've got any other ideas, things that you'd like me to show you, if I can, I possibly can, I will. So drop me a message down in the comments. If you've liked this, please don't forget to show me your thumbs and do me a little like on the video. If you want to see any of the other crazy mad things that we get up to here, they're not always crazy and mad, but any of the things that we do here at Kooky Towers, please then think about subscribing. So subscribing would mean that you get to know whenever I upload a video, especially if you tinker around with that little bell thing, and that will tell you different options that you can have for notifications on when I upload. That's it from me for this weekend. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you have a brilliant rest of your weekend, and bye for now.